Step by step, our situation started to change. We no longer hid from problems or stayed silent about money. On the contrary, we spoke about it honestly and openly, even when it was incredibly difficult. When I started earning consistently, it wasn't an instant fix. In fact, things got harder at first. Because now we had different questions on the table: how to allocate money, what to plan for the future, how not to repeat past mistakes. We learned to set financial goals together, not just to survive, but to move forward. It was like building a shared ship that we sailed together. And that brought us closer. During that time, I realized something important. Money isn't just about numbers and expenses. It's about trust, respect, and understanding. When you know your partner is reliable and honest with you, even when life gets rough, it gives you strength. We began to support each other not just with words, but with actions. I helped her with her work, she helped me with mine. We shared joys and fears, laughed and cried together. Now I see that money can either divide people or bring them closer. It all depends on how you treat it. When we found some stability, the desire to plan a shared future came naturally. We were no longer afraid to talk about big dreams because we knew we could achieve them together. This story isn't about perfect relationships. It's about how we learned to be a team, even when everything went wrong. Now I know for sure, money isn't the reason couples fall apart. It's a mirror of our fears and our potential. It shows us where we need to grow and change. One of the most important lessons I learned is that openness and honesty about money aren't just a good idea. They're the foundation of a strong relationship. I remember the first time we sat down with a notebook and wrote down all of our expenses and income. No shame, no blame, no accusations, just numbers and facts. It was like turning on the lights in a dark room. We saw where our money was going, where we could save, and where we needed to try harder. Of course, not everything went smoothly. We sometimes argued over how we should spend money. She valued stability and saving, and I wanted to invest in growth and new opportunities. But instead of fighting, we learned to compromise. We talked about priorities, set common goals, and each time we reached a small victory, like buying something essential without going into debt, it gave us confidence. That process taught me that financial literacy isn't just about numbers, it's about respecting your partner. When you're open, when you make decisions together, it strengthens the bond. We started planning, not just for the month ahead, but for years. We talked about where we wanted to live, what dreams we wanted to fulfill, how we'd raise our kids. It was real work on our relationship, not just about love, but about partnership. And I realized even the strongest feelings can get lost if you forget that. We learned to live with limitations, but not to limit our love. And that sounds simple, but it was hard, very hard. Because when you're surrounded by Instagram-perfect couples, exotic vacations, gifts, cars, you inevitably start to wonder, what's wrong with us? Why can't we afford the same? I caught myself thinking that more than once. I'd see friends posting photos of new apartments, others upgrading their phones, cars, enrolling in fancy courses, traveling, and me. I was counting the days until my next paycheck, hoping we'd have enough for everything. And it hurt. Because the world constantly feeds you the feeling that you're falling behind. But she always reminded me of one thing. We're not falling behind, we're just walking our own path. And I'm happy that this path is with you. You know, I still remember those words because they stopped me in my tracks. They reminded me that happiness isn't about speed or winning some race. Happiness is when the person next to you isn't competing with you, but holding your hand. And it was around that time that I allowed myself to finally relax. Not rush into a new job, not pick up another shift. Just breathe, be together. I started giving her more of my time. We cooked together, made shopping lists together, laughed over cheap wine that, for us, felt like a celebration. And strangely enough, that's when new opportunities started coming into my life. As if the universe said, "You finally stopped, here's your chance." I began to develop ideas that had been circling in my head for years. First, some freelance gigs. Then, a YouTube channel. Then, the first views, the first few dollars. Not millions, no, but it was my beginning. And she was the first to believe, the first to share it, to leave a comment, to suggest better ways to phrase things. She became my team, my support, my foundation. We didn't argue about finances anymore. We solved problems. We discussed. We did the math, and we weren't afraid of the numbers anymore. We were growing together. We had learned how to live with less, without limiting our love. And it sounds simple, but it was hard, really hard. Because when you're constantly surrounded by Instagram perfect couples, vacations, gifts, cars, you can't help but wonder, what's wrong with us? Why can't we afford the same? I found myself thinking that more than once. Watching friends post photos of new apartments, others getting the latest phones or cars, signing up for expensive courses, traveling somewhere far. And me, I was just counting the days until payday and wondering if we'd have enough for groceries, rent, and maybe a cheap bottle of wine. It hurt because the world constantly whispers to you that you're falling behind. But she always reminded me of one thing. We're not falling behind. We're just walking our own path. And I'm glad that path is with you. Those words stayed with me. They stopped my racing thoughts. They reminded me that happiness isn't about speed or comparing your life to someone else's highlight reel. Happiness is when the person beside you isn't competing, but holding your hand. And right then, for the first time, I allowed myself to let go. Not to run to a new job, not to take another shift, just to breathe, to be with her. I started giving her more of my time. We cooked together, wrote shopping lists, laughed at cheap wines that for us felt like champagne. And strangely, that's exactly when new doors started opening, as if the universe whispered, "You finally stopped running. Here's your chance." I began nurturing old ideas that had been collecting dust in my mind. First, some freelance side work. Then, my YouTube channel. Then, my very first views. And eventually, the first few dollars. Not millions, not even hundreds. But it was a beginning. My beginning. And she was the first one who believed. The first to share the videos, to leave a comment, to help me shape my message. She became my team, my support system, my anchor. We didn't fight over money anymore. We made decisions, we discussed, we calculated, and we were no longer afraid of the numbers because we were growing together.